Empezamos hoy con la cuarta presentación de este simposio con el doctor Alberto Sánchez Bustamante y va a ser un video, así que espero que le guste y aquí vamos.
Sorry for all these improvisations, but that's the way miracles are made. So it was in 2003 in October. We were celebrating that year another birthday of Jose Marti. And fortunately, that same year, we were able to inaugurate a bust of Jose Marti, a monument in Lake Eola. We were able to achieve that by raising a fund with all the Cubans in Orlando. And the monument has all the names of those families that contributed. And if you all have a chance in the future, it's one of the monuments there with other heroes of Latin America. And this symposium, as you will hear now, my presentation, I present the subject of Solzhenitsyn and Jose Marti and the goals of both of those prominent men in history. And I think we need them, their inspiration, we need them more than ever at this moment, not only worldwide, but also regarding Cuba especially. And I think the symposium, what we want to achieve is a crusade of liberty worldwide. And I think we are seeing, even it may seem incredible, we have all the roots now to achieve that worldwide, because we need that crusade of liberty more than ever, okay?
Okay, go ahead. We forwarded to your presentation. So.
Certainly, but I know that we have people from other places and from the intellectual community at large. Friend and a Cuban-American civic leader who is recognized by many here and in other parts of Florida and beyond. He is the founder of Cuban Cultural Heritage and was, until very, very recently, the chairman of the board. He is incessant in his passion to work for things Cuban, cultural issues, political issues. He never tires, so it's really that until very recently, he also had a full-time medical practice. I know he did it. But I think that was back then, and by the way, something very important about him is that he's a freedom fighter. Following Marti, he is a veteran of the Bay of Pigs invasion, and we're all proud of that. So,
Thank you. Well, it's an honor to be here, and I appreciate very much you all joining us tonight. I came with the idea of this meeting and this symposium because we didn't want to let go the 150th anniversary of the birth of Marti, because in the painful struggle in which we are, we have the tendency, most of us sometimes, to even avoid sentimental issues, and Marti is one of them. And unfortunately, that's one of the reasons we haven't had many symposiums and many celebrations for Marti during this year. So we struggled, but we felt that it was a necessity to do this symposium to remember his struggle, because ours now, we're sharing the feelings that we had in exile. People that have never been in a long exile like we are can understand the pain of not being able to see their own land. And Marti, in all his works, he chose that. I'm not a scholar of Marti, so I feel kind of embarrassed to be the one talking about Marti, but I share the passion for Cuba with him and with everybody that feels deeply about Cuba. So I want to share with you all tonight one of the most unknown things regarding what is happening in Cuba. So the subject that I had prepared for tomorrow, and I may repeat it again tomorrow because I feel it's important that the ones not here listen to it, is the Marti doctrine and the dream of Jose Marti. If we summarize the words of Marti, without hesitation we can say it was a dream of freedom and democracy for Cuba, love between fellow men, the dignity of the human being, and their right to happiness. The day before he died, he wrote this in his diary: Cuba's liberty for me would not be party or celebration, but agony and beauty. Regarding hate, he wrote, if I hated somebody, I will hate myself because of it. The moral testament in the days before the war, in Spanish, is odio canijo ladra y no obra, which is a deep, that in an intellectual person like Marti, you can understand, but that was the language he used. In English, is sickly hatred barks and does not act. His views of the Republic were clear when he states, politics is the art of preserving the well-being of a country under the rule of justice and harmony of all his social elements. Where there is no justice, there is no nation. The politics he refers to is virtuous politics. His entire thinking is dominated by ethics. In his own words, he states, the first law of the Republic should be the respect for the full dignity of men. For Jose Marti, true glory is found in the fulfillment of our duties to our fatherland. On the love of work, Marti indicates it is the roots of the dignity of a person and of the collective spirit. The progress of humanity advances on the shoulders of workers. Marti was able to foresee the failure of Marx, whose theory throws men against one another through a war poisoned by the worst hatreds. The worker should not be capitalist, not the capitalist the worker. Both should live in harmony. These were words of Jose Marti. To the materialist of Marx, Marti offers his spiritualism. The German philosopher denies private property. The Cuban defends it. Marti does not believe in dominated or subjugated races, for there are no races, and if there were, none has the right to impose itself upon the other. He condemns every type of dictatorship, In his ideology, there's no room for the Leninist Marxists. He raises love over hatred, liberty over oppression, tolerance over fanatism. The individual is above the state, and the law is above force. Marti Panoramic's vision of Cuba from exile increased the mystification of his patriotic ideal. In 1879, he was quite young then, he wrote to one of his best friends, which was like a brother all his life, Mercado, and he stated, "The first weakness and great mistake of my life, my return to Cuba." In these words to Mercado, he confirms our own sentiment, that for those who have found their fatherland in exile, or those who live between an oppressed land, the later is much worse than exile. To go to an oppressed fatherland is much worse than to live in exile. Because to go to Cuba and see the jail that our mother country is much more painful than to live in exile. And Marti felt that himself, and it's very well expressed, because all of us were dealing with that feeling right now. And the ones that go to Cuba, they pretend to ignore that, but it's there, even if they don't say it. It is in exile that Marti intensifies the mysticism for Cuba's liberty, and where this becomes the essence of his life. It is in exile today that we see the magnitude of Marti's ideals and struggles. In 1884, George Orwell divided the central role, the falsification of history as outlined by Marx, played in the creation of the Stalinist state, and stated, "He who controls the present controls the past, and whoever controls the past controls the future." That's the scientific materialism of communism. Having made history his servant, he can reduce all men to servitude. Solzhenitsyn, the most brilliant Russian writer and philosopher of the 20th century, dedicated his life to expose the totalitarian regime with the same passion for his country as Marti had for his in the 19th century. Solzhenitsyn's books are an enlightenment at this historical moment for the human people. I have read some of them, really, and for a particular moment, they're an enlightenment, because he described all the moments we're going through right now. Spiritualism, faith, and religion prevailed over materialism. He returned to Russia in 1994 after being in exile in Vermont since 1978. I have been deeply touched reading the descriptions of the suffering of the soul and body of Solzhenitsyn, and he never gave up. The passion of that man consumed him, and that's the passion that consumed Marti. in all his life. They are exceptional people that come to the world to lead the present and future generations, because they become universal figures. They become universal examples for all the future generations. And I have always seen in the Cuban crisis a design by God that our suffering is not in vain. What has happened in Cuba is going to make miracles in the future in this continent. And history will prove it. When the truth comes out of what has happened in Cuba, we are going to shake every place in this continent. And we're not going to see what we're witnessing now in South America, of all these politicians playing with the left while their countries go down the drain. Coming to Cuba, as in Russia, trying to control the present, change our past history, tradition, and eliminates our symbols, falsifying the thoughts and doctrine of Jose Marti has been a high priority of the island historians. By invoking Marti as a symbolic architect of the 1959 revolution, they justify their abuses of power and violations of human rights. The knowledge young Cubans have about Marti is very poor and distant from reality. Falsifying history is one sure way totalitarian governments justify seizing power and imposing political systems alien to a nation's history or traditions. Carlos Ripoll wrote an article with details on the subject in 1996, and the copies will be available at the symposium tomorrow, because he gives details about all the falsification of history, especially using Marti. Professor Ripoll is the top Marti scholar in the world. Professor Emeritus of the City University of New York, now retired and living in Coral Gables, Miami. With the collapse of world communism and the bankruptcy of the Cuban totalitarian system, the systematic alteration of Cuban history has intensified, parallel to the oppression, lack of human rights, and the speculation and sellout of our heritage and human patrimony. From a general perspective, this goes along with the disintegration of the system. We just have to look at history. What is taking place in Cuba is the disintegration of a system. We have to join forces to reach our goals of freedom and democracy for Cuba. These goals we seek are the exact same ideals, hopes, fears that in the 19th century became the dream of Jose Marti. Thank you. As you all know, I represent the Cuban cultural heritage, and I want to share with you when this started, the reason I jumped into doing this was that we were so intensively involved with politics that unfortunately our children were growing up without knowing the real Cuba. And that's the most important thing. The only one that we cannot afford to lose. If we lose our roots, our history, our traditions, our symbols, everything is lost. And how can we pretend our children to think on Cuba when everything they have seen on Cuba is a tragedy? Wrath, people, misery, buildings crumbling, all the families, all they talk day and night, because every single Cuban has a psychological disease. There's not one single person that has gone through a tragedy like that that doesn't have a psychological trauma of some kind. And that is visualized by our children. What is their reaction then? Their reaction is rejection of the subject. They are nice, they listen to all, excuse me the word, the crap we talk, because for them, it's not real. And it's not real because, unfortunately, they have not been able to go there and see it. Every single young person that tells me they are thinking of going to Cuba, I tell them, even I am against helping economically Castro by going there. But I totally understand the ones that go to help their family. But I tell the young people, go. Because when you go, you will start fighting with us. When you find yourself, when you find your identity there. Every single one that I know that has been there is a different person when they come back. And but that's the tragedy. That's why the dictator of Cuba, I have the tendency to avoid using that name, because every time the name is used, I feel that we are making propaganda for him. So I'm one of those that doesn't use their name, like they use in the radio stations of Miami, that on every article they mention his name 15 times. But that's the problem with our young people. So that's the reason the Cuban heritage was created. And it's really impressive to me when I have given lectures in the magazine Herencia that we put out, in the lecture we give, we try to avoid showing all this tragedy of the cities collapsing, and they look like Germany after the Second World War, and there hasn't been a war there, because that is negative. We have to show them the beauty of the country, the qualities of their citizens, their beautiful history, their proud heritage. That, unfortunately, after 43, 44 years, we are late about having that approach. But I can tell you, being very proud of what I'm saying, is that the concept of heritage is now deep in exile. Even the organizations in Miami, they have changed their names and included the name heritage, something that 10 years ago was not considered important. So in the many things we try to do, unfortunately we're not able physically to do more, and we don't have the economic means of doing much more than we would like to do. We honor men and women that have represented so well our heritage, that have been working hard to preserve that Cuban heritage. And tonight we want to honor one of those people that is with us tonight here. And I want to call Fred Salinero to come here. And I want Justo Martinez and Rafael Martinez, that they are members of the board of directors of the Cuban Heritage, to share with me the pleasure, and Glenn Westphal can come. Fred Salinero is a third generation. Some branches of his family since 1868 lived in Key West. And one great experience we have had is that I would say that probably 70% of the members involved in the corporation heritage today, we didn't know each other a few years back. And the passion for Cuba has made us like a family. And is the proof that his culture is probably the strongest force to unify people, to unite people that are divided because of political issues. The only thing they have in common is usually culture and religion, but it has a tendency to divide also when they're not in the same religion. Culture does not, because it's the same roots, and that has been another fantastic experience. Fred has been impressive because he's a self-made man, and what he has done in Key West is an amazing job, rescuing some of the historical buildings, building museums, and bringing back the Cuban heritage that has practically disappeared a few years back. And this is an example of what we have ahead of us in Cuba. I think Fred is a typical example of what we can do in Cuba, to rescue our heritage and to bring back all our real history and traditions. I want Glenn to read this because he wrote it so I could read it, since I didn't know some details about Fred's family background. And I was so touched by what Glenn wrote that I felt that he had to read it himself. These three men, these two and me, we didn't know a few years back, and we met because of the passion for Cuba, the same interest collecting Cuban items, and Glenn and myself, we are experts on the subject of lithography. And it's something fascinating that a German American at heart has become a Cuban. he feels for Cuba, I'm telling you, much more than many Cubans. And that tells a lot about the community of men and women when they share ideals. So I want Glenn to read that, and I want first to present this to Fred, which is the Heritage Award. We have given approximately 8 awards like this. Next year in January, Cuban Cultural Heritage will be celebrating our 10th anniversary. It seems incredible that 10 years have gone by. But it reads, he said, for your dedication in preserving and promoting the historical and cultural legacy of the Cuban heritage. Congratulations, Fred.
If I don't watch out, I'm going to be speaking all night. I have to tell you a little bit about this man, and the man sitting in the back, the Honorable E.J. Salcinas. These three men have become my padrinos latinos. And this young man I had the opportunity to take to my homeland in Germany, to the town where my family left in 1623 to come to America for freedom. And one of the most impressive things was when he talked with my German family about the problems he faced as a Cuban American with communism, sharing with them an understanding they never had before, living in a country and divided by communism. So my roots from Germany are the same roots as Cubans, and that's the cultural legacy that humanity has to offer to one another. And when I first began my trek in studying Spanish, I grew up as a child in a Mennonite community. And my grandmother, who was a step-grandmother, spoke German. I would listen to the long-distance radio, and that's how I entertained myself as a child. And I'll never forget getting to these Spanish stations, and they were singing Guantanamera, yo soy un hombre sincero, que no interese la palma. And I would repeat these words because they were fascinating to me. And this legacy of the Cuban heritage has consumed me. Hopefully it will consume me as much as it did Marti. Marti is my cultural icon. He is to Latin America what Alexis de Tocqueville was when he came to America. I don't want to give a speech, but I have to tell you these things. Well, more details tomorrow. Marti truly was an icon to the world, a view of what the United States was. And every individual, no matter what their background, has a phenomenal vision of some of the things that Marti did. Marti wore a black tie in honor of Cuba, who was suffering. When he came to a city called Marti City outside of Ocala, one of the workers had a tie which had a lamb on it. And Marti made a comment in his speech about the tie representing the innocence of the Cubans. That Cuban cigar worker gave the tie to Marti, and he wrote him a letter which said, "I thank you for the honor of giving me this tie representing the innocence of the Cuban people. I will wear it only once. Because until Cuba is free, I will always wear a black tie." And that tie later was given to one of the revolutionary leaders and presumably is in a museum somewhere in Cuba. When I first started going to Key West, 1970, I had the opportunity to go into the San Carlos Club, where winos were burning the records that were in the library, and we were able to get a Jerry Pollo to grant to save this material. And I kept hearing about this Cuban by Barrio de Gatoville, one of these marvelous little communities of Cubans in Key West. I got to know Fred, to know his family, to find his incredible legacy. He left Key West. And when he left, Key West was being converted into this tourist town. And when he returned, he saw the destruction of the Cuban legacy. Fred single-handedly worked to help restore the Cuban Club, the Casa de Luz, and had this passion to try to restore Cuban heritage. And when he began the Cuban American Heritage Festival, it was a virtual transformation on the island of Cayo Hueso, when people who beforehand were embarrassed to say that they were Cuban came out of the closets and suddenly with an Anglo name said, "My grandmother was Cuban, and I'm proud of it." Fred also told me of the stories he faced as a young man, growing up in an Anglo town as a Cuban. And those stories, sufficient to say, illustrated that in spite of the discrimination that existed, the pride of that Cuban community has resurged, thanks to Fred Salinero. And so I think we will always be thankful for people such as, if I had 3 awards, I'd give them to these men tonight. But since in particular we're honoring Fred, I have to say Fred has saved Cuban heritage in Key West, and for that we can never thank him enough.
And I'm
lost for words, but I would thank all of you, and especially you and Glenn, y mi prima Consuelo. I can't say enough. We do need to keep our children, as my grandparents, as my parents. I grew up in Key West. As a Cuban, born in Key West, and my first language is Spanish. They taught me what being a Cuban was. It's in my heart. I went back to Cuba one time. I'll never go again. So Cuba is free. Thank you. Consuelo now to come and join us.
Jerry Pollo, who, if you don't know, the great-grandson of Jose Dolores Pollo, the editor and compatriot of Jose Marti, was a graduate student with me at the University of Florida. And he opened my eyes to the incredible, and I keep using that word, but it is truly incredible, heritage of Cuba. With Jerry as a compatriot, we began doing research and sharing it, and I began to open my mind and my eyes to the people who had this heritage. And one of those persons who had so deeply impressed me was Consuelo, who has dedicated her life in her incredible schedule. I thought I had a busy schedule. The other day she said, well, you know, I get up at 5 o'clock, and I thought, well, so do I. But she said, but I get up at 5 o'clock and research for the next 2 hours before I go to work. I felt so guilty. But Consuelo has taken the dreams that all of us have had to try to bring about an awareness of Cuban heritage. With our Cuban American Heritage Festival and our symposiums, we often discussed about the concept of promoting Cuban heritage through different events. And the culmination of that is this evening. Consuelo has done an unbelievable job in bringing this event together. And she, by the way, this past summer, she went to Spain, where she had found the year before 2 7-foot stacks of papers with red ribbons around them, which were the Spanish consular records from 1853 to 1898 regarding Cuba and Florida. And this is a veritable gold mine. I couldn't go this summer, so I told her about to go, I'll join you next summer. She said, I already have it done. I digitized it all. I don't know how she's done it. She has the basis of things that will totally transform concepts and history regarding Jose Marti. And it's going to be one of the most profound contributions that I think that I've ever seen in my lifetime for Cuban heritage. I could again talk all evening, but wait till my lecture tomorrow if you come, and that'll give me the opportunity. But because of the true amazing abilities to organize this event, we wish to give a plaque to Consuelo, which very simply says, to Consuelo Stebbins, founder of the first annual symposium on Latino studies, El Sueño de Jose Marti, October 9th, 10th, and 11th, 2003. Consuelo.
I just want to thank all of you for coming tonight. I think we've accomplished so much here. This is the first annual symposium on Latino studies. We've managed to bring together UCF and Rollins College and the people from the community. And that's been a wonderful partnership. Dr. Maria Ruiz, Dr. Alberto Bustamante, we were a team that worked together to bring this about. And I want to thank Rollins College very much for letting us get to be part of this.
I don't think there's much to say, other than to say thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed our campus, the wonderful presentations tonight, and we hope to see you tomorrow. Thank you.
College and the symposium of Jose Marti. My name is Dr. Alberto Bustamante. I'm an assistant professor at the Department of Modern Languages and Literatures here at Rollins, and I'm also director of the Hispanic Studies program here at Casa Iberia, building next door. Let me start by mentioning a few practical issues. First one is parking. Assuming that most of you already have the parking pass. I see somebody with the parking pass already. We have some more available there. And during lunch you can get.
Bueno, continuamos. Bienvenidos a las nuevas personas que están aquí con nosotros en vivo. Y como dije antes, estamos transmitiendo en vivo a través de YouTube. Y continuamos ahora con el doctor Alberto Sánchez de Bustamante y va a hablar sobre el tema de Solzhenitsyn y otras cosas. Gracias.
Es una pena que no se haya, that we haven't been able to see it and hear it clearly, but maybe there's a possibility that the YouTube we can see it more clearly and understand it better. But anyway, I think that the reason I wanted you all to see this video is because there is present the Cuban heritage and the 3 or 4 generations, that how it produced for the future. And most of the members in the presentation, we didn't know each other until the Cuban heritage got us close together. We appreciate George Salsines, which is one of the leaders of this state of Florida, to be here with us. We are very honored that you both have come and joined us. So I want to talk now about Solzhenitsyn because through the years, I have been insisting very, very much that it's already 63 years. Every single presentation I have been involved with, and there are many, I have insisted that we haven't learned from the changes in Eastern Europe, and we have not followed the steps that those countries went through using their experience. We Cubans have not been able to follow that example. And honestly, I don't know how many times this subject, we at the Cubic Center, I presented this subject in not less than 6 presentations. Later on, through the Cuban heritage, we had about 5 different presentations of each of the countries in Eastern Europe, of the experience at what they went through, to use their experience to our fight. And still, it didn't work out. I really encourage that we have been able to finally reach the way to show the truth about Cuba in Europe and South America with the web, and now this presentation to present them through the YouTube worldwide. So This presentation of Solzhenitsyn, I did it in September 4 of 2003. And Yolanda Rodriguez was very nice and sweet to do a translation of this section about the part of the conference related to Cuba. So I'm going to read her translation at the end, but start giving some insight about Solzhenitsyn. That was not included there. And it's the vision and legacy of Alexander Solzhenitsyn that is in Spanish, so I'm going to read it like I wrote it originally. Nacido en Lobodots, Russia, in 1918. Obtuvo su título de doctor en matemáticas, sirvió en el Ejército Rojo.
Este micrófono se oye mejor. No sé si está.
Yo creo que aquí vamos a estar hasta la 1, por si algunos de ustedes tienen planes diferentes, pero creo que es muy importante de que se le haga al frente a esto que voy a hablar ahora en este momento. Sirvió en el Ejército Rojo como artillero durante la Segunda Guerra Mundial. ¿Se oye mejor ahora? Ok. Prisionero del Gulag ruso por 8 años antes de 1945, por criticar a Stalin, empezó a asistir y a escribir en el Gulag y pudo lograr el Premio Nobel de Literatura en 1974. Un día en la vida de Iván Geryonovich, en 1962, el primer círculo en 1968, la Sala del Cáncer en 1968, agosto de 1914, escrito en 1971, y el archipiélago Gulag en 1974. Su descripción del sistema comunista es impresionante. La pasión de su lucha en denunciarlo es un ejemplo para todas las víctimas del sistema como nosotros los cubanos. Cuando luchábamos como disidentes, nos dice, no teníamos armas ni tanques, nuestras manos vacías, pero hemos defendido nuestros derechos con nuestra firmeza de espíritu. Nos negamos a hacer arreglos con el mal y nos negamos a sacrificar nuestra conciencia. A los que nos ayudan, que son pocos, no hacen otra cosa que defender su propio futuro. El bien y el mal se han convertido en Occidente, para muchos en un chiste, pero son conceptos muy genuinos y reales. Yo diría que lo que yo voy a leer aquí es lo que estamos viviendo aquí en este país en este momento. O sea que se puede aplicar de muchas maneras diferentes. El bien y el mal se han convertido en Occidente para muchos en un chiste, pero son conceptos muy genuinos y reales, no pasados de moda como algunos pretenden. En el capítulo 17 del Gulag, exaltando de nuevo los valores y la firmeza de espíritu, nos dice Solzhenitsyn: la libertad bajo las órdenes de Stalin. En sus novelas, nos dice Solzhenitsyn que la libertad espiritual del prisionero de conciencia es mucho más real que el carcelero. En sus novelas sus palabras se tornan proféticas. Con la victoria del bien sobre el mal en el alma humana, coincide con Dostoyevsky en su amor y pasión por Rusia y en la fe de la redención cristiana. En su lucha por la verdad histórica, destruye el mito de humanistas y constructor que le atribuían a Lenin, afirmando que las ejecuciones, el sistema penal, las desapariciones se produjeron desde el inicio por órdenes de Lenin y no solo durante el culto de la personalidad de Stalin. Lenin no solo manifiesta su odio a la falta de honestidad y a la mentira como una de las características más prominentes del sistema. En la presentación en Harvard University en 1976 y previamente en septiembre de 1975 en un discurso en la convención de AFL-CIO, hace suyo el proverbio ruso: "The yes manager is your enemy, but your friend will argue with you." Eso es muy profundo y muy real en la vida. Le recuerda al pueblo americano los errores de Yalta en el entreguismo al dictador Stalin por parte de Roosevelt, los desastres de la política de la posguerra, no comprendiendo cómo los gobiernos de los ejércitos victoriosos no dictaron la paz con libertad y justicia, siguiendo el interés nacional y el interés de los pueblos oprimidos. Los años de la ayuda humanitaria por Estados Unidos, que nunca se dio a conocer al pueblo ruso, todos esos años de ayuda al pueblo ruso, no lo sabía el pueblo ruso. Acusa el entreguismo de 1.500.000 seres humanos por los ejércitos aliados, especialmente ingleses, de los soldados rusos con sus familias a Stalin para ser exterminados porque se habían unido a Occidente. Después de pedir asilo en la frontera de Checoslovaquia, eso sucedió en Checoslovaquia, y le entregaron a 1,5 millones con sus familias a Stalin y fueron todos ejecutados. Recuerda asimismo la política de exterminio ocultada en Occidente. Todo eso que ocurría en Rusia se ocultaba por la izquierda aquí en este país. La política de registración falsa para exterminio posterior, los miles de muertes, no en las cámaras de gases, sino en barcos repletos de víctimas, ahogados como ratas por la KGB. Y hago un paréntesis, en los viajes nuestros por el Volga, pasamos 3 lagos gigantescos que todos eran artificiales, porque en los años 30 y pico Stalin creó toda esta red de canales para transportar la industria pesada rusa, porque no tenían suficientes camiones para hacerlo y la trasladaban en barcazas. En la etapa en que empezaron a abrir las compuertas para que el agua entrara en todos aquellos canales y en los lagos artificiales que se producirían en ese momento, acudieron a Stalin varios prominentes individuos de algunos de esos pueblos y le dijeron: ¿y qué hacemos con los que ahí viven? Contestación de Stalin: pues no les avisen porque no tenemos dónde ponerlos. Y fueron ahogados como ratas en sus pueblos sin que a nadie se le avisara de lo que iba a pasar. Y en cada uno de esos lagos sobresalen torres de iglesias que puede uno observar al pasar el barco. Y así han estado desde que abrieron esas compuertas en los años 30 y pico. Los muertos en sus casas jamás se permitió que se sacaran, como si fueran ratas, no seres humanos. Eso todo lo vimos nosotros. La política de hambruna en 1932 y 33 por Stalin en Ucrania es bastante conocida. Pero yo he leído los relatos de las víctimas. Mataban a sus hijos y se los comían. Eso, muy pocas personas hablan de eso. Esos son hechos reales de los que crearon este mundo del comunismo. Lo más atroz en la historia universal es la historia del comunismo, no Genghis Khan y todos aquellos pueblos primitivos de que se habla los horrores. Nada. Todo eso es pequeño al lado de las matanzas del comunismo. Hace hincapié Solzhenitsyn en el encubrimiento y la mentira que nos hace recordar el régimen comunista cubano. Hace hincapié en nos recuerda que las ejecuciones por la Rusia zarista entre 1826 y 1906, casi entre 80 a 100 años, no pasaron de 894 personas. De todo eso que decían de los zares, 894 entre 80 y 100 años. En las revoluciones de 1905 a 1908, 2.200 ejecuciones tuvieron lugar. En tiempos de Lenin, en las provincias centrales, el estimado de más de 16.000 fusilados en solo 18 meses. En diciembre de 1932, antes de las masacres de Stalin, 265 murieron ejecutados en la cárcel de Kresby en Leningrado. En tiempos de paz, un mínimo de 1 millón fueron ejecutados en 2 años, lo cual es 50.000 veces más de los que murieron en la época de Nicolás, de los zares que los describían como demonios. En comparación a la Inquisición española, donde 10 personas morían por mes, en 1918 y 19, la checa ejecutaba sin juicio previo 1.000 seres humanos por mes. Y en 1937-38, Stalin exterminaba a 40.000 por mes en los paredones de fusilamiento. A la caída de la cortina de hierro en 1989, se estimaban las muertes de Stalin en aproximadamente 20 a 30 millones. Quiero hacer hincapié en esto porque todavía hoy en día, la izquierda sigue hablando de 20 millones. Nosotros estuvimos en Moscú en el año 2000. En el año 2000 las cifras oficiales del gobierno ruso de muertes de Stalin eran 46 millones. En ningún artículo en Occidente se leen los 46 millones. Se sigue hablando de 20 millones porque todo lo del comunismo se cubre, todo lo del nazismo se sigue repitiendo y exagerando, cuando el verdadero enemigo es el comunismo y no el nazismo. Estas verdades, desgraciadamente, no se leen a menudo. Yo he dedicado mi vida a dar a conocer la verdad del comunismo. Cuando hablé con Rick Wilson, que hizo una donación grande de herencia, además del artículo sobre Bacardí en esta revista que salió, me impresionó mucho porque terminando la primera conversación me dijo, Bert, me dice Bert en lugar de Bertie, me dijo, Bert, quiero aclarar una cosa, de que si hay alguien en la directiva de herencia que esté a favor de que se quite el embargo, yo no puedo participar con ustedes. Entonces yo me eché a reír y le dije, Bert, desde que tengo uso de razón, he estado luchando contra el comunismo, que es lo más atroz en la historia universal. O sea que no te tienes que preocupar por eso. En sus explicaciones de la debilidad de Occidente en su lucha contra el totalitarismo, menciona Solzhenitsyn lo siguiente: el ser humano en la sociedad occidental se considera centro de lo existente y de lo que lo rodea. Adora las necesidades materiales donde considera reside la máxima felicidad de este mundo por obtenerlas. El culto a ese bienestar material disminuye la voluntad por defenderla. Eso está muy interesante. En otras palabras, que la ambición humana por las necesidades y la vida de lujo hace olvidar los verdaderos valores para los que se debe de vivir. Y eso es una realidad que todos vemos diariamente. Considera que existe una falta de visión completa de la presencia de Dios, debilitada por la pasión de bienes materiales. El materialismo facilita todo el avance del comunismo. Entonces, les voy a leer un artículo que saqué en Herencia y pasamos entonces al resumen que hizo Yolanda del inglés, que hemos sacado copias, o sea que hay copias aquí para que se lleven con ustedes, porque de verdad creo que deben de tener copias de las raíces del síndrome de dependencia, que es donde está la base del control comunista de los seres humanos. El legado de Solzhenitsyn y el camino a la Tercera República, se lo voy a leer en español, entonces pasamos al tema del inglés, de los cuales hay copias para que se las lleven, porque creo que lo deben de tener con ustedes. El valor y la dignidad irreductible de un hombre, un pueblo, de la historia y de la naturaleza está en relación con Dios. la actualidad de las ideas de Solzhenitsyn está todo en su espiritualidad. Las condiciones presentes de la isla de Cuba y de su pueblo con la devastadora, esto fue cuando ocurrieron los 2 ciclones en Cuba, cuando yo escribí esto y lo publiqué en Herencia. Pero lo voy a leer tal como se hizo en aquel momento. Después de cerca de 50 años de totalitarismo comunista, han llevado a la nación a un callejón sin salida. La ausencia de la infraestructura básica y de recursos de todo tipo, tanto como la presencia de un gobierno que ignora las necesidades de su pueblo por el empecinamiento de mantenerse en el poder, crea una urgencia a todos los niveles, que Cuba se abra al mundo, que su gobierno ofrezca una apertura democrática, que el mundo democrático y libre ofrezca entonces una ayuda masiva de alimentos con asistencia técnica supervisada por organismos internacionales, que se gestione la manera de que los cubanos de las 2 orillas puedan unirse como una sola familia en la reconstrucción y en crear el camino a la Tercera República. Con libertad, el talento empresarial cubano y una economía de mercado se logrará salir lentamente del desastre presente. Muchos de nosotros vemos la mano de Dios en esta encrucijada y creo que son necesarios esfuerzos, meditación, determinación para emprender el camino. El futuro de Cuba está en manos de su pueblo dentro de la isla. Pueblo que merece más que nunca nuestro apoyo para dar un paso hacia la libertad. La pérdida irreparable este año del escritor ruso Alexander Solzhenitsyn, Premio Nobel de Literatura, amerita una seria revisión de sus escritos y de su código moral ante la situación desesperada del pueblo cubano. Nadie ha descrito mejor el sistema marxista-leninista y la pobreza espiritual e intelectual del mismo. Solzhenitsyn fue testigo presencial de uno de los mayores fraudes de la historia y un vocero de la verdad. En sus primeros 4 años de vida murieron entre 20 a 25 millones de rusos de hambre y de miseria. Su juventud la vivió en un proceso que se hundía en el horror y la barbarie. La convicción granítica, esta frase es verdaderamente profunda. La convicción granítica de este hombre extraordinario que defendía su amor a la verdad y a la libertad. Eso es lo que estamos defendiendo los cubanos, la verdad y la libertad. Lo hizo invulnerable a toda forma de abdicación y chantaje. Demostró que aún en medio de la barbarie y el salvajismo más irracionales, lo que hay de noble y digno en el ser humano puede sobrevivir, defenderse y testimoniar y protestar, y entre sus frases lapidarias denunciando el comunismo merece mencionarse esta: la Gestapo torturaba para obtener información, pero la KGB torturaba por el placer de hacerlo. Esa frase me impresionó siempre mucho, porque dicha por un hombre como Solzhenitsyn es real, no de pretensión de ningún tipo. habiendo él sufrido todo el proceso de la guerra. En sus escritos manifiesta su ira, pues se negaba a aceptar, escuchen, la pasividad de la cultura occidental, la cual está presente en la crisis mundial y la crisis de este país hoy en día. Y la falta de firmeza de sus líderes en la lucha contra el totalitarismo marxista, el código moral de Solzhenitsyn debe ser la base del cambio en Cuba, que ayudará a aproximar el momento en que se puedan transformar los genes, porque es como genes, como transforman al ser humano, creados por el sistema comunista, y la menciono brevemente. 1. El valor y la dignidad irreductible de un hombre, de un pueblo, de la historia y de la naturaleza está en relación directa con Dios. La actualidad de sus ideas está en la espiritualidad. En su famoso artículo No vivir en la mentira, de todo lo que he leído de Solzhenitsyn, el no vivir en la mentira es lo más sólido de ese hombre, y lo he leído no menos de 100 veces. Menciona la disyuntiva entre seguir siendo un servidor consciente de la mentira o entender que ha llegado la hora de purificarse, de volverse honesto y ser digno del respeto de hijos y compatriotas. Eso es lo que le está haciendo frente al comunismo en Cuba, es la necesidad imperiosa del cubano de volverse honesto y ser digno del respeto de sus hijos y sus compatriotas, porque eso se ha perdido en Cuba, el respeto por la esclavitud del comunismo. La llave más sencilla y accesible al pueblo para su liberación es la no participación en la mentira. Number one. Esa es la mejor manera de cortar la fidelidad al régimen. Número 4, no debemos dar pasos de valor cívico. Nosotros lo podemos hacer. No son ellos los culpables de todo. Lo somos también nosotros por permitirlo. Nunca como ahora se han visto tan claros el fracaso y la incompetencia del sistema. La fuerza más grande y poderosa para lograr la libertad, el camino a la democracia y a la Tercera República es la fortaleza interna del cubano, lograda por trabajo, sufrimientos y defensa de los valores patrios. Por 50 años, esto fue cuando escribí yo esto, por 50 años, ya son 63, se le ha sacrificado al pueblo la libertad a cambio de promesas promesas de prosperidad. Han vivido 63 años en Cuba por promesas de prosperidad que nunca han tenido. Y solo se ha aumentado la miseria y fomentado la dependencia. Ahora, con esta hecatombe, la de los ciclones, solo se vislumbra un futuro de más y más miseria. Hoy en día no son los ciclones, el ciclón del comunismo. La miseria en este momento es peor que nunca en Cuba. Todos estos años, 2 o 3 años del COVID, recuerdan los mismos relatos que yo he leído de la peste bubónica en Europa, de cómo se enterraban a los muertos. Eso ha ocurrido en Cuba en estos 3 años. No tienen madera para poner los cadáveres. Se mueren en la casa y pasan 10 y 12 días y no viene nadie a recoger esos muertos. Y cuando los recogen, los ponen en cartuchos, en plásticos, y los entierran en fosas comunes. Eso está ocurriendo en toda Cuba con el COVID. ¿Quién habla de eso? En la prensa de Occidente, ¿quién habla de eso? Eso está ocurriendo, ha estado ocurriendo por 3 años. Y 18 generales han muerto, y los han enterrado el mismo día. O sea, que no murieron de COVID. Esos 18 generales fueron ejecutados. ¿Por qué tienen que ocultar de qué enfermedad tenían y de qué murieron? Ninguno de ellos se ha dicho nunca de qué murieron. Y los entierran el mismo día para que no se entere nadie de que habían estado enfermos, pero no murieron del COVID. Porque ¿por qué tenían que ocultar si la verdad si era del COVID? Pero era tan evidente que no podían ni decir que habían muerto de COVID. O sea que esa es la realidad de Cuba en este momento. En el 2008, 60 años de la Declaración de Derechos Humanos firmada en 1948 por iniciativa cubana, hoy ese mismo pueblo reclama sus derechos arrebatados por más de medio siglo y solo así podrá labrarse su propio futuro y conquistar el derecho a la felicidad. O sea que ahora les voy a leer la sección en inglés que creo que es la que debe quedar para el futuro. Que Yolanda hizo muy buena traducción y pudo hacer un summary of the rest of the conference. The syndrome of dependence with the communist totalitarian system. In the monumental work of the Gulag, Solzhenitsyn describes in detail the dependency of the Russian people on the system. He was the first to give it the name dependency syndrome. Other places it's known as the Stockholm syndrome. Numerous historians have tried to interpret the Cuban totalitarian system and have called it in different ways medieval millenarism in the style of Germany's Leiden and other tropical communist ways, but altogether is nothing other than the cult of the dictator personality that create the most perfect absolute system of abuse of power in America. That would be a source of envy for any feudal monarch of the Middle Ages. So in other words, in these 63 years, the evil has created a system in which a monarchy with capitalism, state capitalism, by communism. So communists with a monarchy of the Middle Ages in which all the descendants of the Castros, children and grandchildren and probably great-grandchildren, who their friends are? The royalty of Europe are the friends of the descendants of the Castro. They all have properties in Europe, they go to the best universities, and their friends are the royalty families of Europe. Personally, I feel that there has not been anything genuine in the Cuban Revolution. The dreamers are currently convinced by Fisher's action. My adherence to an extremist ideology is a straitjacket that strangles thought. Adherence to an extremist ideology like this is a straitjacket that strangles thought. Marxism was applied in Cuba scientifically, studying the dictator for years, the experience of Hitler and Stalin. It was applied like a religious rite. The ritual turned the leader into a god who, like Hitler, identifies with the homeland. Who is not with him is against the homeland. Quien está en contra de Castro está en contra de la patria. The dependence of the people is created by the centralization of power to do this notebook of rationing, la libreta de racionamiento. La libreta de racionamiento fue creada para crear el síndrome de dependencia. Cuando aplicaron la libreta de racionamiento, no había hambre en Cuba. So the ration book was created to create the dependency syndrome. Private property is eliminated and medicine is centralized. And distribution is tabulated, and so is education. In other words, hunger and misery are institutionalized. The system prevents the people from enjoying prosperity. Only the oppressors enjoy it. However, the people are told that now they have what they did not have in the past. So in other words, the slaves are told that now they have what they didn't have before. With the control of the basic need of the individual, people cannot survive without the system, and the circle is created. The new generation grows up under the paternalism of the maximum leader, the father of the Cuban homeland, who educates them, feeds them, heals them when they're sick, gives them free medicine, etc. The physical and psychological control of the individual is already created. I can make the remark that in Orlando, I followed 10 different individuals for 2 to 2.5 years, because I wanted to know how long they will change their minds regarding the dependency syndrome. And it was very interesting that the average was 2 years, living in USA, because all 10 initially, they were defensive on any phrase that would be criticizing Castro. And it was the same syndrome that me, as a physician, had, and I was able to have patients of mine in my practice of OBGYN that they were abused by their husbands, especially the cases of service, that poor people that could not afford insurance and so forth. In the hospitals, physician will take care of the service cases, and the majority of the cases of the dependency syndrome were patients like that, in which we had to get a judge that would dictate that they had to be separated from the hospital and stay in the hospital a few days. Well, unfortunately, the majority of those patients, 2 or 3 days later, they were again at home with the abusive husband because they just didn't know how to survive without the person that controlled their lives. That's it. That's the dependency syndrome. I saw it in my patients. So I had the experience as a physician to deal with that syndrome. That's the same syndrome of communism. Exactly. Those of us who have practiced medicine for years have had multiple opportunities to see this syndrome in men, women, and children abused by fathers, mothers, or spouses. In each of these cases, the dependency syndrome is latent. They recognize the control. They hate it. A typical example is the husband or alcoholic father who abuses their wife or kids, but the family cannot be freed or separated by the control they hate and suffer in silence because of the insecurity of not being able to survive on their own. Hence the comment, he is a monster, but he is my father. He provided education for me. He gave me food. He cured me when I was sick, and more. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the dependency syndrome of the Cuban people, as it was with the Russian people for 70 years. In my opinion, this is one of the most serious problems now and in the approaching transitional phase. And this syndrome has a cure, but takes time. In my evaluation in cases in exile, I estimate that it takes between 1.5 years to 2 years, and in a change or from misery to a moderate, decent life, it could take even longer. This is one of the factors that many do not understand in the Cuban people. Add to this the laziness of working for the lack of incentive without a future. The picture is even more complicated. To keep this in mind is not pessimistic. It's to be realistic and prepared to face it and solve it when the time comes. That syndrome right now in the United States is being applied. All those government checks given to people that some may need it, but others do not need it, is to create the dependency on the government. That is being made right now exactly in the United States. To keep this in mind is not to be pessimistic, it's to be realistic and prepared to the fact and solve it when it comes. Tomorrow in the future of Cuba. With freedom, with opening of the democratic government, with economic opportunity, and with our help with investment and job opportunities, these difficult stages that they fear more than we do, and rightly so, will be overcome. However, there are positive parts such as the long process of oppression and misery for 63 years with the obstinacy of the leader and his system has been disappearing from invincibility. That was described in the original and the summary we eliminated to make it easier to summarize the invincibility, the revolutionary concept that we were betrayed by the United States and all this crap that we grew up with the people from the left always bringing the subject that every problem we had, they were blaming the United States and the intervention and all that crap. That was all false, because we had between 1902 and 1923, 1925, more than 1 million Spaniards that they were an asset for the country. But with them, there were coming some individuals with communist idea that they participated in the influence that was taking place between 1920 and 1928, when the crisis with the Machado government in 28 created all the extreme of the 1933, in which the beginning of the end of the Republic started with the September 4 of 1933 with Batista. No country in Latin America eliminated the armed forces and created a new army, but Cuba was the only country in Latin America in which that took place. And in March 10, the second coup of Batista, they were the same sergeants that were then officers, captains, lieutenants, generals, and et cetera, they were the same ones that did March 10. They interrupted democracy again in Cuba. And then that was not enough for Batista, but the 1st of January of 1959, with 3 opportunities he had to create a way out, he left the country because of hate, of never forgiving the Cubans, had never liked him, and left the country so it will be destroyed. I have been doing a research on that subject for more than 20 years, and Marco Antonio Ramos, if you are here, reached the same conclusion as me, that he took over because he was broke for the divorce with his first wife, needed money, and he decided to make another coup with the excuse that the government of Prio was this and that. And so it's very sad, but that's the real story. I want to put that seed of truth so you can give some thought about it, because that's definitely that way. Well, so in other words, the 3 syndromes of invincibility, revolution, and the myth caudillista of the invincibility of Castro, these myths are all gone now. I believe this is an ongoing rejection of revolution, violence, and caudillismo. The long process of suffering is latent in order to create the foundations of a true democracy or parliamentary system with a constitutional system that respects all the people whose rights were taken, and that's how it should be. Let us look to the future with optimism, with determination that Cuba will be for Cubans and that no one will dictate our destiny in the years to come. In Solzhenitsyn's work, which has inspired this presentation, the Christian culture of death and resurrection, the faith, spiritualism, and courage is latent. Communism broke the chain of continuity. It imposed perversity and terror for generations in our culture, our heritage, and our faith. But the reverse and the resurrection, we enter the mysticism of new values and new vision for the new Cuban nation that will be that is born. The life is drawn and good triumphs over evil, as has always happened over centuries. Thank you. So that's it. I think that there we have a lot of thinking to do in all this process. So I hope it helps you all. I hope it helps you all. Thank you.